Hi, my name is Goodpaster, and welcome back to Miracles, Marvels, Memories, and Me, Chapter 3. But before I do that, I'm going to break away from the book for a moment and tell you something that happened in the last 72 hours, because it's a memory that I'm never going to forget, and I want to tell it to you because it would fit this book, but it just happened 72 hours ago. I was in the living room watching TV, and it was about 10 o'clock, and I walked into my den where my computer is, and my wife was in there listening to the Gaithers from Indiana, and we're from Indiana. And when I came in, I asked her if she would like to dance, if she would like to dance to two of our favorite songs, one by Mel Carter and one by Jackie Wilson. And she said she would. So she puts it on, and we're dancing to two of our favorite songs. Hold Me with Jackie Wilson, and Mel Carter is To Be Me, To Be Mine. I'm not really good with titles, but it's a beautiful song. And anyway, we danced throughout the entire song, both of them, and then we had to quit because both of our knees were killing us. And so I stood there in the middle of the living room with just one light over in the corner, and I held her. And I leaned down, and she put her head on my chest, and it's quiet. And I whispered that I love you in her ear, and she whispered it back to me. But when I looked into her face, she was radiant. I mean, not just beautiful, she's always been beautiful. There's never been a question about that. But she was radiant, and I'd never seen that look before, and I couldn't take my eyes off of her. It was like a miracle. And again, she was always beautiful, but she was just beautiful. Radiant is the best word I can use. So anyway, we had to quit because of her knees, and that was pretty good. And we just stood there, and then it reminded me of one of my poems that I wrote to her on our 25th anniversary. I wrote to her, it was called Now and Forever. The warmth of your smile, your loving tender embraces, the touch of your hand in crowded places, our hands entwined, my arm on your shoulder, these things I'll cherish as we grow older. Words fail to describe the way that I feel, for my love for you is forever. Forever and eternally real. I will love you always. But that also brings me back to another poem that I wrote to her on our 40th anniversary. And we've had 55 as of October 1st. I wrote to her My Only. That's the title of that one. The angels in heaven know you are my everything. Everything I've ever hoped for. Everything I've ever dared to dream. Our love is a full, sweet flower with angels on clouds above, singing low to a whisper about our very special love. Life begins with love, with tender words soft and sweet. It's the blending of our heartbeats that makes our love complete. You are my only. Chapter 3. God First Spoke to Me. I dearly loved the outdoors when I was a kid, and the low rambling hills of southeastern Indiana was the ideal place for all the activities I so thoroughly enjoyed. For instance, I loved swimming in the creeks, especially at a place called Number 11 Railroad Bridge on the edge of town. There, the water was so cool and deep that even when you carried a large rock cradled in the pocket of your arm and tried to reach down and touch the bottom, you never could. At least none of us 11 and 12-year-old boys that swam there almost every summer's day could, anyway. To this day, I have no idea how deep that wonderful swimming hole was. Once the whole gang of us from Cochran was there, and that would be us boys from the west side of town. We went out to Number 11 Bridge to swim as usual, and were swimming around naked as jaybirds, as we almost always did, when one of the identical twins in our gang, and don't ask me which one it was because I don't remember, decided that every one of us should have to dive head first from the top of the bridge. And that meant from the very top. And that was simply brilliant. To do that, that meant each of us would have to shimmy himself up the almost vertical incline there at the end of the huge structure. A monumental Kodak moment, if there ever was one. You betcha. 13 little naked boys climbing up the steep incline one after the other. I couldn't believe I was doing this because I've always been afraid of heights as far back as I can even remember. Well, let me be a little bit more truthful here about that, if I may. It isn't the heights that frightened me so much, it was the falling down from those heights and the shattering of one's bones that honestly frightens me. The twins, the oldest and toughest guys in our rough, tight little group, dove first right alongside each other. And well, they should have too. It was one of their ideas in the first place. Now, in exact order of age, we boys dove, one by one in chronological order. Everyone making the 30-foot head-first plunge into the smooth, chocolate-colored water far below. Everyone, that is, except me. When it was my turn to dive from this fantastic, unbelievable height, my toes, and I mean all 10 of them, somehow elongated, wrapping themselves around the sharp edge of that hot, black painted steel beneath my feet with an extremely high-powered vice-like grip, and weren't even beginning to think about letting go. This skinny little old 11-year-old boy from Cochran wasn't going anywhere, especially down, and down head first. And to be truthful, I didn't have the foggiest notion I was going to get down from up there. I thought to myself, as I stood there naked and all alone now, under the hot sun, and this extremely uncomfortable hot beam that was busy burning the bottoms of my feet, that this is going to be a very embarrassing moment in my short life if the boys down there in the water have to go and call the volunteer fire department to come all the way out to Cochran and rescue me. And I knew for a fact none of these fellas would throw me my pants. They were having too much fun at my expense, they were. Would you have thrown me my pants? Go on, be honest. I bet you no. No, you wouldn't have either. You'd have laughed right along with them, I guess. Would you have thrown me my pants? Go on now, be honest. No, you wouldn't have. You'd have laughed right along with them, I know. Dive, Donnie, dive, came the first challenge, or whatever you want to call it, from one of the 12 heads there in the murky water. Then it came. As I expected it was from these guys. Dive, chicken, dive! Challenge. Well, there it is, Red Lake fans. The insurmountable C word was hurled in my direction by one of these guys. The undeniable chicken word. And I have to live with these fellas for who knows how many more years. Oh, please, dear God, don't let me be the only one not to dive from up here tonight. Oh my God, I was hoping for an atom bomb or a pop-up tornado or something to that effect to go off somewhere close by to distract their attention away from me so they'd forget all about all this foolishness. Please don't let me be the only one not to dive up here today, Lord, I prayed. I'll never be able to live it down, never. Somehow just then I got a little courage or spunk, or something anyway, and I squatted down as far as I could go on the hot metal beam that was still gripping tightly to both of my feet, as if that 1.5 foot in reduced height was going to make a significant difference in this monumental, monstrous 30-foot fall, which I'm here to tell you today, it didn't. Finally, after a little bit more hollering, berating, and unmentionable shouted obscenities hurled my way, I pushed off the beam with my eyes tightly closed, and I'm proud to say, in a downward direction as well. Head first, I fell through the air for approximately, it seemed, an hour and a half, maybe. At least it felt that way to me anyway. But now I'm thinking to myself as I plummeted down through the air, where in the blazes did the water go? Had I missed it somehow and dove into a wormhole or something? It was then that my entire life passed before my eyes. And as you would probably expect from an 11-year-old boy, there wasn't a whole heck of a lot to be seen. For some reason on the way down, I needed to know where the water was. And God himself only knows why I did it. But I tilted my head back a little bit and looked. And just as I did, splat. That water hit me in the face so hard, and nearly snapped my head off at the neck at the hinges. But I did it. I dove head first off old number 11 bridge, and no one could ever take that away from me. Never, not ever. I was so proud of myself. I was one of the Cochran boys now, and forevermore. I was one of the elite. I had passed muster. I loved playing the game of baseball even more than eating back in those days, if you could believe that. So if you ever wanted to find me, all you had to do was look for the eternal baseball game going on somewhere in our neighborhood or down in our little town. One time, on the day of an organized American Legion game against a really good team across the state line, Cleves, Ohio, Cleves-Taylor, I overslept. And that's when good old Murphy's Law came into play, as it usually did in my life. These guys from Cleves-Taylor were some of the best athletes I have ever had the opportunity to play up against at this point in my life, and I was really looking forward to it. Really though, truth be told, I was looking forward to kicking their young behinds all over the place. They were really good athletes, all right, these guys were. There's no doubt about that, none whatsoever. But also I thought at the time of this particular group of guys were a bunch of whiners and very poor sports on the field to play. Not the kind of players I would want any child of mine to imitate anyway. These guys would spike you for the fun of it, make you bleed if you were in their way on the baseline, spike you hard whenever they could with their razor-sharp cleats. And they'd do it in a New York minute too if you were slow to get out of their way. Personally, I did my job on the playing field, but I also stayed out of their way. Or sometimes these guys would reach out and slap the ball from your mitt while running past you to try to steal second base. Or steal a base, I mean. They'd attempt any form of dirty play or skullduggery they could think of to win the game. Sure, they may have been better at the game than I was at this age. Maybe they were even more physical and athletic than I was too, but not one of them, not a single one on their entire team, had the proper heart or respect for the game that year that I did. And that includes the majority of my teammates as well. Cleves-Taylor beat us 9-3 that day. Oh well, we'll get them next time. Wait and see. And there was a next time. It came later that same year in the Regional American Legion playoff games. I don't know what woke me up that morning of the Cleves-Taylor rematch. Showdown day is what I like to call it. But I know I was late getting up because the sun was already shining brightly in my room when it should have been just the crack of dawn and still dark outside. I got myself in a panic hurrying around the house that morning because I knew I was going to let the team down if I didn't make it to the game. Due to family vacations, our Legion post had just barely enough players to field a team that year. And you know what it means if you don't have enough players, don't you? It means you have to forfeit. And everybody in the world hates a forfeit. All baseball players do. Quickly, I grabbed up my spikes from the closet and my glove from the shelf, and I did my best imitation of dressing myself on the run to the meeting place for the long ride over into Ohio. I've got to hurry. I've got to get there. I can't miss my ride. Hurry, Donnie, hurry. Too late. The caravan of cars going into Ohio had already left the ballpark without me. But what the heck? I had a thumb, didn't I? Sure I did. As a matter of fact, I had two thumbs. One on each hand. But you never hitchhike using the left thumb because that would make you look weird, wouldn't it? Here, let's try a little experiment of sorts, just to prove my point about that hitchhiking with your left thumb. Ready? Stick your left thumb about high by your head. Got it? Good. Now pretend to be hitchhiking. Move your thumb left to right like this. See what I mean? It was pretty dumb, doesn't it? Told you so. Okay, stop. Stop already. I said enough. Enough. I can't take it anymore. Stop doing that. Okay. Experiment over. Finally, after a long time, I caught a ride with a nice couple from town who recognized me and were heading my way, and they took me all the way to the ballpark just across the Ohio-Indiana state line. The game was in the last inning when I got there, and the score was tied 7-7. Our coach, Coach Fleming, saw me get out of the car down by the highway, and head in his direction as fast as I could. "Time out, ump!" Coach Fleming called to the home plate umpire. "Time out!" Made it, Coach. I made it. I overslept. Sorry about that. "Goodpaster hitting for Chase!" Coach yells to the umpire while slapping me hard on the head with his ball cap. Obviously a sign he was glad to see me. But come to think about it all these years later, maybe all he wanted to do was just rap me a good one. Heck, now I'm confused. I don't know which it was. Anyway, back to the story. I smiled at the guys on the bench, and most of them were giving me the thumbs up signal. Now that I'm here, I stepped into the on-deck circle, swinging 3 bats around my head to warm up a little bit before standing in to face their pitcher. Then I moved up to the batter's box at home plate. There was 1 out I could see on the scoreboard there in right center field. The pitcher glares at me. Why is he glaring at me like that? I just got here. I didn't do anything. Not yet anyway, but I'm about to. I know it. I can feel it. I glared back for what it was worth and waited for the pitch. The pitch. I was going to take it no matter what. I needed to see what this guy had in his bag of tricks. And oh boy, did he have tricks. No, let me clarify that a minute. Not only did he have tricks, but he had some real good stuff too. Maybe even professional stuff. I don't think I ever saw a baseball thrown with so much velocity before. I couldn't have hit it with 2 bats. And for toppers, it was right down the middle of the plate. "Strike 1, I says to myself, banging the plate in front of me with the bat, trying to regain my composure and my balance. "Ball!" the umpire called out, maybe a wee bit louder than need be. Well now, where was this guy looking when the pitch crossed the plate at Mach 1 speed? It sure couldn't have been in the strike zone. Duh, that was a strike, but I'll take it. I swing the bat around mightily once again, giving thanks for that small little gift from the ump. But now I'm ready. I'm going to take this guy downtown with the next pitch. You wait and see. Pitcher ready, batter ready. The pitch. Blame, I should have swung at that beauty. It was right down the middle of the plate. Again. "Strike," I says to myself. "Ball 2! The umpire calls out. Secretly, I leaned back and tried to get a better look behind the mask of my benefactor, thinking that somehow my dad had gotten off work early today and had taken a second job as an American League umpire. Or maybe it was my mom dressed up to look like an umpire. Anyway, every pitch this tall, lanky pitcher threw was a picture-perfect strike in my book. This guy behind the plate, I find out later, was upset with the pitcher for some reason or other, and was mad enough to call the next 4 pitches that were thrown balls, no matter where they were in proximity to the strike zone. And the guy standing up there at the time was going to reap an unearned reward of a base on balls. And I just happened to be that guy. Now I'm on first base and have a very short lead towards second. And as I mentioned earlier, the score is tied. Everyone here in this part of the country knows that I'm the slowest runner on our team. Probably even the slowest runner in all of baseball in the entire world. Even the guys from Cleves Taylor know that I am, I'm sure. The next batter walks up to the plate. The first pitch to him. "Strike!" cries out the umpire. Once again, too theatrically for me. I, with all my copious speed, I head for second base. I even amazed myself here doing that. I didn't even know I was going on the first pitch. I just went. "Safe!" the field umpire called out as I slid headfirst into the rough brown canvas bag. Down on third base side of the field, I see a very irate and irritated Coach Fleming reaching down and picking up his hat from the ground where he threw it when he saw slow old me head off for second. Anyway, I was safe, and that was all that mattered to me. Coach will just have to learn to live with it. Same batter, second pitch. "Strike 2!" I heard the ump call. I was gone again. The throw from the pitcher whistled down to third base like a V-2 rocket, but it was thrown high, and the third baseman had to leap with everything he had in him just to keep it from going into the outfield, which would have easily allowed even me to score as slow as I was. Safe! I was all smiles from ear to ear. I had just done the impossible around this part of the country. Back-to-back steals against Cleves Taylor. Someone, someday, may even write a song or maybe a sonnet about my daring do. I felt great. Time! Coach Fleming cried out, beside himself with anger. Metcalf in for Goodpaster. What? This can't be happening. I'm the one that's going to win this game for our team, not Metcalf. Sit down, hot dog. Coach Fleming yells angrily at me. You're done for the day. You're not going to lose this game by trying to steal home. Now sit down on the other end of the bench and be quiet. I walked to the end of the bench like a whipped puppy. Now I'm sitting on the bench, and the rules state that I can't even walk back onto the field again once I've been taken out. Next pitch to the batter. What? What's this I see happening here in front of me? Bobby, the kid that just took my place? He's heading for home. He's running with the pitch. He's trying to steal home. Will he make it? Blame no, he won't. The batter struck out. The catcher sees Bobby coming from a long way off and tags him out at least 5 feet away from the plate for an inning-ending double play. The first batter up for Cleves Taylor in the last inning was their seriously tall, lanky pitcher, who was obviously a good hitter too, it seems, because he takes Rusty's second pitch deep into the parking lot across the highway for a major league style home run. We lose. Cleves Taylor wins 8-7. At least we're getting closer. We'll get them next time. You wait and see. As for me, I should have stood in bed. When not playing ball, that's baseball or basketball, by the way, I loved working on the neighbor's farm, any neighbor's farm. One day, the farmer that lived in the big wooden framed house, White House across the creek from me, called my home long before daybreak even. 2 long rings and 1 short was our phone number back then, believe it or not. Why he's calling so early this morning is to ask me to come to work for him to cut up and haul corn for silage with him. Him and a bunch of other farmers he knew around the area. This meant that I could go to the tack room in one of his many barns and pick out a machete to my liking and join all the others gathered there in the early morning fog below the large oak tree in front of his house, which I did. When everyone that was coming to help had gathered there under the big oak tree, we divided up and rode the double and quadruple teamed wagons down the gravel road to the cornfields. I was in high cotton, I tell you, to be with these guys, these farmers. Row after row of corn stalks we cut by hand that day and hauled off to the silo at the end of our road, where we hurriedly offloaded onto a mechanically operated conveyor belt that led to a loud shredder. And from there we went into a huge round silo for storage. The corn stalks we cut that day were at least 4 feet over my head, and I worked right alongside everybody else all that morning long, doing exactly the same thing they were doing. I did everything they did. Finally, the magic words we were all listening for were shouted out about midday. Dinner time, let's go eat. I rode back to my neighbor's house, which was directly across the street from mine, if you recall, on an almost full wagon of freshly cut corn with a farmer I didn't even know existed until that morning. There wasn't much conversation between us, though, for he didn't know until this morning either that I existed. But I do remember he was nice and told me while we rode along that he had 8 kids. His youngest, he told me, had a disease I'd never heard of before, a disease he called polio. He told me this little boy, whom he loved so much it hurt him to talk about him, may never walk again. I remember I almost cried right there on the wagon when he said that, but couldn't because we were coming into the yard just then, where everyone else was getting ready, washing up and ready to eat. Everyone except us, that is. And I didn't want them to see me crying like a baby. I washed up right alongside these hard-working men, washing the powdery, overworked soil from my hands and arms just like they did, and prepared to feast down alongside them from the long picnic tables their wives had so beautifully prepared. What a feast they had made for their men. Unbelievable. A feast fit for kings, which to me at this stage of my life, these guys were. On the tables were countless bowls of green beans and yellow and green squash, 8 or 9 bowls of whipped potatoes and dark brown gravy to top them with, and every color and kind of tomato there ever was, I bet you. There were large ceramic platters of pan-fried chicken and country-fried steak next to several colorful platters of brown pork chops, blackened on the edges just like I like them. An iced-down gray tub full of cantaloupe slices and huge blood-red watermelon sections. Several pitchers of sun-brewed iced tea and freshly squeezed lemonade and iced-down glasses dotted the tables from end to end, and much, much more if you can believe it. I won't even get into the fresh warm breads and scrumptious-looking desserts that were there, or the apple and peach pies. Oh, I almost forgot the homemade vanilla ice cream. I must be slipping. Donnie, come here, son. The host farmer and my neighbor across the creek in the big white house called me. Then, taking me to the side with his hand on my shoulder, he said quietly, "It's dinner time, boy. You going home now and grab a bite to eat and we'll pick you up by the bridge when we're through." I did. The next summer, I had all but forgotten that hurtful slight I had received from my neighbor and was once again working by his side in one of his many fields. "Giddy up, old mule," the farmer would always holler to one of his 2 brindle-colored mules. I never did figure out which one of those 2 he always called old mule. I guess it wasn't any of my business now anyway, was it? We had just finished offloading a wagon load of hay into the barn and were heading back to the field for another when I got an overwhelming notion to wash off the dirt and chaff I had collected that morning through hard work. The largest pond on his property was nearby. I jumped off the wagon and began running down the gently sloping hillside, heading toward the pond as fast as I could go, with the best intention of diving out as far from the edge as I possibly could. When a voice from out of nowhere said to me, plain as day, plain as anything, "You will write chains of words everyone will want to read," the voice said. Upon hearing that fantastic pronouncement, I slid sideways on the ground, coming full stop on the hillside there, where I immediately called back up to the hill, to the ever-quiet old farmer, slowly riding along, deep in his own thoughts as usual. "Louis," I shouted, "did you hear that? I'm going to write a chain of words that everyone will want to read." Louis stopped the mules and looked down at me strangely as if I had grown a second head right there in front of him. "Giddy up, old mule," he said, like he always does to the mules, and started walking away as if nothing of note had happened. I turned away from Louis and the mules then and walked the rest of the way down the hillside, walking in deep wonderment of what just had happened as I walked into the water, standing up, not diving, like I ever wanted to do, thinking to myself, that was the dumbest thing I've ever said in my whole life. The voice I heard that day years ago in the field with Louis and the mules, I distinctly remember, said I would write chains of words, meaning plural. But I remember saying to Louis, a chain of words, thinking singular. There is a difference, you know. When I write a poem, and I've written 40 or so of them now, that I've self-published and sold over the years, they are chains of words, aren't they? I believe they are. 30 years later, my wife Pat and our son Steve and I are living in Orange Park, Florida, where we spent the entire day at beautiful Vero Beach, swimming and playing around and just being together. And we're all extremely tired and sunburned, I recall. So tired were we that night, I believe I went to bed before little Stephen did, around 8 o'clock. At exactly midnight, 12 o'clock straight up, I rolled over and faced the digital clock on the end table dresser, its bold numerals easily lighting up that portion of the room on my side. My eyes were wide open now as if I'd slept for many hours. I tried to go back to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. It was useless. I tossed and turned and turned and tossed, but I still couldn't sleep. I got up and went to the kitchen for a bite. Sounds like an old rock and roll song there, doesn't it? An old lyric from a song. I sliced up an apple and a chunk of sharp cheddar cheese and placed the snack on a paper plate and went into the living room to watch some TV, thinking maybe that would lull me back into a sleeping mode. I needed to sleep, and soon, because I had to go to work in just a few short hours. Come on now, Donnie, sleep. I lay down on the floor in front of the television set and scooted up real close to the set in order to keep the volume down so as not to disturb my wife and son. And then I got interested in a black and white movie that was playing. Black and whites are my favorites. They actually have a storyline involved and not always trying to outdo the next guy with some dumb special effect, like blowing up something all the time or rolling a car over 40 or 50 times when one would have probably done the job. So cliche these movies are today. Then, just as I'm thinking that thought, I'm the thunder in your footsteps. I heard a voice say in my left ear. Uh-oh, I thought to myself, I'm getting another poem. I was making my living at the time as a writer, and thoughts of this nature were thankfully always bouncing around inside my head. Immediately I got up to get a pencil or a pen to write with. Either would do. And I noticed when I got up I couldn't remember for the life of me the reason I had gotten up. That's weird, I thought, even for me. But apparently not, I suppose. I did notice, though, when I got up, there were 2 ballpoint pens scattered about on the coffee table. Well, so what? Who cares about pens anyway? Back in front of the television set I go, back to my movie. I am the thunder in your footsteps, the voice returned, saying the same thing I heard before. This time, though, I pushed off the floor with my arms and got up to as far as my knees, when the voice stopped again for the second time. It stopped, I noticed, as I rose higher from the floor, where I was lying in prostrate position. The voice seemed to want me to lay on my stomach. Or I'm crazy to think this. Don't answer that just yet. You'll have plenty of time later. This time I grabbed one of the ink pens from the coffee table and the paper plate from the top of the television and laid down flat on my stomach and prepared to write if it should start speaking to me again the third time. I was ready for it this time. Couldn't have been more ready. But guess what? The pen, that miserable excuse for an ink pen, it wouldn't remain in the locked position. So I heaved it over my left shoulder with my right hand and grabbed for the second pen. And guess what? Yep, you guessed it. It was the same story with that one too. It wouldn't stay in the click position either. Then I remembered that my son, Stephen, had been playing with both of these pens the night before at bedtime, taking the springs out to see what what it was made of. And he forgot, or more likely than him, the little rebel, he didn't replace the springs in either one of them. I couldn't throw the second pen away like I'd already done with the first one, so I gripped it tightly with a closed fist. It's just as the voice returned to me and said, I am the thunder in your footsteps, the lightning in your eyes, the flash of your metal, the creator of the skies. I am who mends you through your sorrows and pain. I am the maker of your dreams, the creator of the rain. I am your heartbeat, your river, your flow. I am your God Jehovah, who loves you so. This was written in less than a minute, and I had to ask the voice twice to slow down, but it didn't, thank God. Thank God. The voice I heard so clearly in the field all those years before with the old farmer had returned and fulfilled his promise to the little boy that was there, me. He came back to me. This I Am poem is just one of many chains of words that he, the voice I heard that day in the hayfield, said I would write. And the only one of 40 or more that I heard spoken in my left ear. I thank God I had my ears on to hear that day, his precious words, not mine. I was just his secretary that day, that's all. Acts 9, verse 7. And the men which journeyed with him stood speechless, hearing a voice, but seeing no man. Chapter 4. Somebody pushed me. After a 4-year stint in the United States Air Force from 1964 to 1968, I landed a job in a coal-fired power plant called Indiana and Michigan Electric Company, Tanners Creek Division in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. On my first day at this huge facility located on and next to the Ohio River, I was assigned to go along with another worker and monkey grease the fittings on the conveyor belts coming up from the main hopper. A few moments after we arrived at our assigned work site, 2 city police cars along with an ambulance and 2 Indiana State police cars roared up with their sirens blowing all the way to the hill to our location and skidded sideways to a stop in the loose bituminous coal that was everywhere around us. The reason for this noisy invasion of law enforcement officers turned out to be a badly decomposing body, the body of a man missing from Louisville, Kentucky, which had been found earlier this morning by one of our barge handlers. The body had become attached to one of our company barges by a piece of his clothing. But why these police officers 100 feet below us felt they had to make such a noise and skid to a stop the way they did still eludes me, because the missing man had been presumed dead for over several weeks before our employee found him. Fortunately, if you could call it that, the man who had drowned had a son with him that day who, thanks be to God, made it to shore to tell the authorities what had happened. "Welcome to I&M," my co-worker sarcastically proclaimed as we looked down at the sad state of affairs. "It only gets better from here," he said. That's when I realized this could be a dangerous place to work, and I had better be on my alert for my safety more than I usually am with my fragile life. Things, though, went along fine for me for a long while that day after that awful, inauspicious welcome, but several minor incidents of a more humorous nature might be worth mentioning here. And please don't think for an instant that my soul didn't grieve for that unfortunate fellow, because it did. But I couldn't dwell on it. He was in God's hands now, and as we found out later, had been for several weeks. "Follow me," my co-worker instructed after lunch. "Where are we going?" I asked. "You'll see, but you got to keep it a secret. No one's to know," was his cryptic response. I followed my new friend to the elevator shaft of Unit 4, the newest and most advanced modernized addition to the plant, where he pushed a button taking us down to the lower level. "It's right in here between here," he says, squeezing in between 2 gigantic vats of something. "What is?" I asked. "What's in between here?" I wheezed out, like a dumb sheep following his wayward shepherd. "My secret hideaway place, that's what," he says, as if we're back in elementary school playing hooky. The in-sync rhythm and gentle hum of the steam-driven generators down here in the inner bowels of the plant was very, very pleasant, I remember, as we passed between the vats and walked out onto a gray concrete platform. Here my partner in crime immediately sat down and dangled his feet over the side and laid all the way down on his back and closed his eyes. Immediately, though, he seemed to remember something he thought was important, but he forgot to tell me, and he sat bolt upright and said, "There are plenty of books for you to read if you want to." He picked one up and started to read. Well, at least he was looking at the pictures. The warm temperature here in this unauthorized area of the plant and the low resonating hum of the generators is what I think got to me that day, because suddenly I was sound asleep in this concrete and steel reinforced crypt, 100 feet or so below the river level. When I awoke from my little hooky playing nap, it was 4:45 in the afternoon, and my first shift ended at exactly 4 o'clock. I'm sure this 45 minutes of unsanctioned overtime on my very first day will make my new bosses very pleased with me. Ecstatic, I'll bet. My first day on the job and I get 3/4 of an hour overtime. I didn't say anything about my being late to clock out, because my boss didn't say anything either. But I never went down there again and did that. Now, let me tell you about Mr. Frogging Guy and how we met up again in our life again, once again. There was this one fellow that worked there at the plant, same as me. A real tough character, if there ever was one. I remember him well from back in my high school days. He was a senior when I was a freshman, and he loved picking on people, especially the younger, smaller ones. People like him today are referred to as bullies. Well, anyway, whatever you want to call him, this guy just loved frogging people. Frogging means you hit somebody with their knuckle really hard, and it hurts like heck, I'm telling you. This guy, Mr. Frogging Guy, I was sorry to find out, hadn't changed as far as I could see in the last 8 years since our high school days and his glory days of beating up everyone. He was still acting like a jerk, and I thought it was about time, and my duty, that he had a little upcomings coming to him. A little biblical payback, if you will. An eye for an eye kind of stuff. Same as Mr. Tough Guy, I was a barge handler here at the plant, which meant we worked on the tugboat and tied off the barges that were pushed under the dinosaur-looking crane to scoop up the coal for its long journey up to the plant and to the coal reserves. Around midnight one day, a few minutes before the end of my shift, I noticed Mr. Frogging Guy standing at the top of the levee where he was about to come on duty to relieve our swing shift crew. He set his lunch bucket down there at the top of the levee, walked away and leaving him alone, unprotected. Wrong thing to do with me around. I owed this guy. I owed him big. And now he was going to pay for all the times he's unmercifully tortured me. About this time, a friend of mine, Tony, I seem to know a lot of Tonys, don't I? I called my attention to a large dead catfish floating next to our catwalk. The catwalk was the two narrow boards we used to get from the land side out onto the tugboat. Aha, idea time. Grab it for me, Tony, I said. Oh, no way, man. That stinks. I know, man. That's what it's all about. I know it stinks. That's the idea, I said, pointing to Mr. Frogging Guy's lunch bucket up at the top of the levee there. Oh, no, said Tony in a panic. He'll kill you, Donnie. I know him. So do I. I know him as well as you do, probably. Probably even better. Just grab it, will you? Tony didn't want to, but he dipped the fish out of the river with a piece of driftwood and handed it to me with a frightened smile across his face. You're going to be dead meat when he catches you. I'm warning you, Don. Hurry, I said. We got to do this before he gets back and catches us. Tony shrank back into the dark of the coal yard when I said that and replied from there. Not we, brother. You're doing this, not me. And get that straight right now. Not me. Okay, I said, trying to calm him down. I'm doing it, not you, but I'm doing it for both of us and all the other guys he's frogged over the years and bullied around in the past. And don't forget, Tony, Froggy's frogged you more times than he's frogged me, and that's a fact. I'm not afraid of him, and he deserves this and more if you ask me. Just hurry up and open the lunch bucket, will you, and I'll put it in. At least do that much. We got to get going here before he comes back and catches us in the act. Okay, I'll do that, but no more. You're on your own after that. Agreed, just do it. Hurry up. Tony unlatched the lid and unopened it and ran off as fast as he could back into the darkness of the coal yard, heading for the dilapidated shack where we cleaned up in each night before going home. Don't worry, Tony, I hollered, but I don't think he heard. Mr. Froggy can't whip the both of us if we stick together in this, I said, placing the bloated fish on top of Froggy's lunch and closing the lid. Then, just like Tony, I slipped off into the darkness. Froggy must have noticed the extra weight in his lunch bucket right away, because he came charging angrily into the bum room before I even had a chance to begin changing my clothes. Madder than a wet hen, he rushed into the shack, which was a plus for me, because I heard him coming from a long way off, and had time to duck into the bathroom stall and lock the door. I had just slapped the bolt shut on the door when I heard Froggy screaming wildly that he was going to kill me. Kill me and Italian Tony, and kill us both. He tried his best to rip the doors off the hinges to get at me, but I was able to hold him off from the inside, pushing his hairy knuckled fingers off the top and the bottoms each time he tried, sometimes using my foot. Tony, my dear friend, had panicked and ran out the door in his stocking feet, leaving his shoes and me well behind. So much for 2 against 1, I thought. Tony had gotten into his car and drove away real fast through the coal yard that day, from what I was told later. I didn't blame him, though, not a bit. But now I had to deal with Mr. Frogging guy all by myself. "It's okay, Donnie boy," Mr. Froggy said softly and sweetly. "You can come out now. I know it was Italian Tony who put you up to that. I know it wasn't you. Come on out now, Don. I won't hurt you, I promise," he said, lying through his teeth. "Yeah, right," I replied back to him, like I haven't heard you say that to guys a million times before in the past back in high school. "I think I'll just stay right where I am for right now, if you don't mind." "Say, Froggy," I said to him through the bathroom door, because I know he's still out there somewhere in the shadows waiting for me. "Isn't that the whistle I hear from the tugboat calling you?" "Why, I think it is. You better go now or you'll be late. And Biggie Boat Rat, he won't like it, if you're late." I was being kind to him now, wasn't I? I was warning him he better get to work. And then he left. Just like that, he left the building. I couldn't believe it. And I was still standing. And in one piece. Now that's what I call a miracle. But you want to hear something funny? 3 days later, I think it was, Italian Tony came up to me complaining that he was going to sell that brand new Firebird he had just purchased, selling it because it somehow had developed an awful fishy smelling aroma coming from somewhere he couldn't quite locate. As it turned out, what that aroma was that Mr. Froggy guy didn't come straight away into the bum room to get us that night like I thought he had done. He had taken his time to stop by Tony's unlocked car and put a small portion of bloated fish under the passenger seat before he came into the shack. Well, so much for paybacks, I reckon. Anyway, at least it wasn't my car. For several months running that same year, it had been severely cold in the Ohio River Basin near Cincinnati, Ohio, and the river was frozen over 2 to 4 inches thick in most places. I was still assigned to the tugboat crew, but we didn't have much work to do because the barges further north of us were frozen in more solid than we were, and couldn't even begin yet to break through to get to us with the coal that we needed so much. One day, over our tugboat's notorious hard-to-hear ship-to-shore radio, a word comes to us from the main man, our plant superintendent. Biggie Boat Rat, our lead pilot on this shift, listens intently to try to decipher what's being said by the big boss. Me, I tuned it out. I tuned it all the way out because of the ear-piercing static, and also because I wasn't in charge here. I just did whatever Biggie told me to do, and that was it. No sense bucking for a promotion because I wasn't getting one. I was leaving soon to go to college. "Bernie," the super says to Biggie, calling him by his real name. "Yes, sir. I hear you, sir. Over," Biggie replied. "Bernie, I'm up here in my office, and I notice a problem we need to take care of. Over." "Problem, sir?" Bernie asked. "Over." "Yes, a problem. I can see through my office window a duck of some sort frozen in the ice, about a quarter of a mile due north of your position on the Kentucky side of the river. Take your crew and go save the duck. Over." "Did I hear you right, sir?" Bernie's trying now to confirm the order, because he can't believe it, and neither can we, his shipmates on this tug. "You say there's a Kentucky duck of some sort you want us to go and rescue. Is that what I heard you say, sir? Say it again, if you will. There's a lot of static on the ship to shore tonight. Over." "That's affirmative, Bernie. You heard me, right? You heard me right. Go save that duck. Over." Old Bernie, or Biggie Boat Rat, as we finally called him, but not exactly to his face because he was about 6'6" and weighed about 350 pounds. He was having himself a real time now, he was. Now he'd get to go and break up some of the ice around the crane area like he'd been wanting to do for several days. And as a bonus, he'd get to use this over $750,000 vessel to save a duck of some sort, as the superintendent had just so affectionately called him. This rescue, or attempted rescue, will be the story of the week down at the barbershop / gossip parlor in Rising Sun. You can bet your bippy on that it will be. Well, guys, you heard what the boss said, Bernie says to me and Ronnie, the other deckhand on the tug. Let's heave to and go save that duck of sorts, like the super ordered. Let's get going. We were now, me and Ronnie, that is, were about to become heroes of some sort, I do believe. The large, thick chunks of ice we were hard-pressed to break up with our new boat hampered our progress tremendously, but we, courageously as ordered, trudged forever onward, forever forward, just like the men of the famous Light Brigade, marching straight into the Valley of Death. This was not a game, though. Not for us anyway, it wasn't. It was an extremely dangerous activity for Ronnie and I to be doing on the steel-plated, slippery deck of the tug that night. Waves of river water and chunks of ice came up and over the sides of the tug from all directions and at the same time. We did our best, though, to shove them back into the river as we trudged along, but we weren't always successful. "Watch out, Donnie!" Ronnie screamed as a gargantuan-sized chunk of ice slipped across the metal deck from his side and knocked both of my feet out from under me. Heroically, Ronnie vacated his post on the port side of the vessel and grabbed onto my frozen coat sleeve, keeping me from being ice-boarded off the vessel into the river. And all of this insane drama just to save a duck of some sort for the superintendent. Finally, after a long time of hard work outside in the freezing cold and far away from the cozy, warm cabin where Bernie was, we got to within 30 yards of that poor little birdie when Biggie Boat Rat let completely off the forward throttle for some reason only he knows. The sudden change of speed almost sent both me and Ronnie careening off the front of the vessel head first into the frozen mighty Ohio River. Recovering his footing first, after just saving me from going over the side, Ronnie commences with our rescue attempt of the poor wretched animal. But as soon as he bent over the side with his super long tri-pointed gaff tucked securely under his right arm, ready to break away the ice that had the little birdie so horribly trapped, the bird just got up and walked off. Didn't even bother to fly, just walked. Walked away as if insulting us for our feeble attempt at becoming heroes here under the cold, bright, white, sparkling stars. "Why, you mangy, dirty bird, you," Ronnie lost his composure. "You never were trapped at all, were you?" he said angrily. Ronnie and I just spent all this time in this 20 or so degree below weather to save a poor little ducky that didn't need to be saved at all. But trust me, people, he did now. The little feathered rat. Old warm as toast Bernie up in the wheelhouse saw all this happening under the forward floodlights and could tell by our body language and rowdy demeanor that we were both mad as heck and fit to be tied. Then, unexpectedly, Bernie throttled up the tug's engines, speeding them up to high fever pitch. We both could hear and feel this happening from our place way out on the forward bow. And now guess what? You guessed it. This $750,000 vehicle we were riding on now became a supersized equivalent of a 410 shotgun in the hands of 3 angry men. And we began to chase that trickster duck from ice floe to ice floe, trying our best to kill him, or at least to run him over some. We chased him, or her, I promise you, we didn't even really care about that time, all the way back over to the great state of Kentucky, to the great state of Indiana. Run, ducky, run! P.S. You know that duck never did try to fly to get away from us that night? He just wallowed away faster than us, that's all. Life at the plant could be very interesting sometimes, and other times totally and completely boring, like most other jobs are, I suppose. But one day, the labor gang foreman, Charlie, informed us that we would all have to go work overtime today because of a conveyor belt that had just come most of the way apart at its seams on one of the long underground shafts coming up from the coal yards, sending tons upon tons of coal over the sides and onto the steps. Loose coal was everywhere, up and down the entire length of a 45-degree, 300-foot-long tunnel, about a foot deep on all sides. And nobody, and I mean nobody, was going home today until this was all cleaned up and squared away. And that was that. Several of us, and I don't know why we were specifically chosen by Charlie, but we were, slipped and slid all the way down to the bottom with good old Charlie right alongside of us, pointing out the places he wanted us to work. My position was almost all the way to the bottom, but not quite. Climb over there and work on that side, Goodpaster, he ordered, and shovel the coal down from there to those guys below. That looks like a mighty dangerous position for me to be in over there, boss, I objected, noting immediately that there wasn't any escape route out of there if something bad should happen. Couldn't I just stay over here on this side where you guys are and do the same thing? Get over there and do what I tell you to. Do your job. Quit your belly aching. You're getting overtime, ain't you? Now get going. I don't want to be here all night. I did as I was told. I went over to the dark side. That's just figuratively speaking. It was all dark down there. At first I laid on my back while pushing and shoveling the coal as hard as I could. Then I rotated over onto my side and pushed the heavy wide shovelfuls down to the two men waiting there at the bottom, where they in turn shoveled it out to another conveyor belt, leaving the area via another route. Thick amounts of black coal dust filled both the air and our lungs, and the visibility down there was so poor you couldn't see very far in any direction. That's when I discovered I'm not only fearful of heights and high places, but I'm also claustrophobic as well. Watch out, Goodpaster, watch out, Charlie shouted, excitedly pointing a finger past me. What is it? What's going on? I hollered back through the fog of thick coal dust. Charlie didn't respond to my questions. He just kept pointing that stubby little finger of his up toward the entrance to the shaft. With that, I turned even further over on my right side than I was, and horrifyingly saw for myself exactly what he was pointing at. The tunnel was disappearing above me, above us. The small amount of daylight we could still see from up there was decreasing for some reason, and whatever that reason was, it couldn't be good. Get down here now! Charlie was screaming at the top of his lungs. I tried to get down, but I couldn't get my footing in the loose coal. I kept slipping and sliding. I kept trying though, but with each push I got exactly the same result, which wasn't good. Oh my God, I thought to myself, I'm gonna die right here in a coal mine, in a stinking coal shaft. Now I'm getting scared, real scared. The conveyor belt had broken all the way through from side to side at its metal connecting points and was now sliding with tons and tons of coal on board, I might add. It was sliding our way fast. Gravity has a way of doing that with heavy items, don't you know? I was about 15 feet or so from where I desired to be, which was safely behind a thick concrete wall with the other three guys that I was working with, but it didn't look like I was going to make it because I kept slipping and sliding. Trust me, I wanted to live. I desperately wanted to live. So I decided to roll over to my right side, thinking that just might find some traction over there. But just as I rolled that way, something or somebody, I felt, pushed me back in the opposite direction, just as a huge mass of steel-reinforced conveyor belt and coal slammed right past me, smashing hard into the feeder line there at the bottom. I was laying on my left side now, almost completely encapsulated in a pocket of conveyor belt and coal, with only my right elbow involved. And it was caught between two layers of belt, and it didn't even hurt. I was easily extracted from my situation by several yardmen who had hurried down from the top. Charlie and the other guys were safe as well, hidden away from the danger behind the concrete wall. A bulldozer was used to hook to the broken belt and was dragged up to the top and hauled away for repair. Literally weighing tons upon tons, this rolled up mass of conveyor belt and coal would have crushed me to death if I had had my way that day and gone over to my right, the way I wanted to go. But that something or somebody, once again in my life, didn't want me to do that, that was for sure. Thank you, my friend, whomever you are, for watching over me. Once again, you saved me, but for what reason, I still do not know. I thank God for all you guardian angels and for a stubborn, boneheaded foreman with darn good eyesight that can see right through coal dust. Hey folks, here's a tease for chapter number 5. Please come back and hear the full chapter number 5, but listen to this tease. Chapter 5. Dear Lord, we'd love to have a child. Ah, the 60s. The glorious 60s. Alas, I knew them well, Horatio. The time of sock hops, charmingly decorated pink poodle hoop skirts, and best of all, the thousands upon thousands of stolen kisses under the high school bleachers. The 60s, the time we all understood the meaning of and the lyrics to the songs we were dancing and singing along with. That is, with the notable exception of Louie Louie, of course. And who could ever forget the unforgettable sounds of Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons? What a great singing group those guys were. Fantabulous. I especially remember one particular song of theirs, Walk Like a Man. Trust me, I don't ever remember feeling more masculine than when they threw that old 45 on the old Victrola music box. Didn't Frankie Valli, though, sing that song like a man with a double hernia? He probably had the highest falsetto in the entire music industry back then. That was some great music to dance to, and it most certainly was. We danced and danced and danced back then, held our girl tight, kissed her well into the night, and fell deeply in love under the warm glow of the silvery moonlight. Today it's more like, oh, I don't know, Jack, which tattoo parlor do you want to go to tonight? Frankly, I don't care anymore, and I'm not going to get my backside pierced anymore either, because hardly anybody ever notices it, and plus it hurts when I sit down. In 1965, I married the most wonderful girl in the whole wide world. I married Patty Jean Hartwell. The very first time I saw her, and that was that very night, I'm promising you, I fell madly in love. That night, I wrote in a little black book that I always carried in my, tucked deep down in my back pocket, a note to myself that I was going to marry this gorgeous girl, and I did. To me, it was a case of love at first sight. The year was 1964. How Pat and I met, you may be asking yourself right here, or maybe you're not and could probably care less, who knows. But I'm going to tell you anyway for filler if nothing else. It was at a local dance hall, of course. Where else? I was on the dance floor dancing the very popular dance of the day called the Frug. I was dancing with a very short girl, who danced very well, by the way, by all standards and teenage criteria. When I looked over this girl's bobbing, twisting all the way around head, similar, I'm thinking right now to the actress Linda Blair in that frightening movie, The Exorcist. When I see this stunning apparition standing on the sidelines, chatting away cheerfully with a couple of other girls. Well, anyway, getting back to the story. I must have been too obvious in my observing of her, or more likely knowing me, I must have made some sort of unearthly guttural sound, because the girl I was dancing with just stopped dead in her tracks, right smack dab in the middle of the Frug.